Welcome everyone to MailFuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about Black Mirror Season 7 Episode 5. It's called Eulogy. Spoilers for the episode, as per usual. This is an interesting one. Paul Giamatti stars in this episode as someone who finds out he's informed that someone he used to know, a woman that he dated back when he was in college, kind of after, just maybe a little bit after that time period, has passed away. And he's asked to contribute to the funeral using this technology. This is the one little science fiction element of the episode, is this technology that allows to kind of like, you know, with his permission, kind of take like a moment or images or like a memory and something they can put on show for others at the funeral. So he's not going to attend the funeral because this woman had moved to England and he's still in the US. But he kind of reluctantly agrees to maybe contribute something via this technology. So the episode really follows the idea that he had a rough history, that, you know, whatever relationship he had with this woman Carol ended badly, and he has not thought about her in a long time. And when the technology arrived, and it's just this little disc that goes on the side of his head, and there's like an AI voice talking to him, who takes the form of a young woman once we sort of go inside the, I guess, the virtual reality of it, if you will. Basically, he can't remember her face. He can't remember Carol's face. And, you know, he's very hesitant to what he do this. And the AI voice like says, hey, why don't you get some old photographs and look at them and stuff? And basically, the technology allows them to look at the photographs, and he kind of like goes into his head with the aid of this technology, and is able to sort of look close in the photographs. Like it almost like builds a scene around them, and his memory kind of fills in the blanks and kind of forms like the rest of the scene. To some extent, like an approximation of it based on what he can remember from the time. But the core crux of this episode is that he cannot remember this woman that he was in love with. He can't remember her face. And throughout the course of the episode, he goes from really not wanting to kind of remember to actually having some happy reminiscing memories about her and getting frustrated that he can't see her face, to then getting the pain sort of comes back as he kind of like feels angrier and remembering and trying to justify why he feels the way he does and why he's like crossed out her face in all these photographs. That's something that happens a little bit later in the episode, as we find out that he does have a bunch of photographs. It's not just the few that he said he had where you can't see her face because she's looking in the other direction. No, he's got a bunch that he's like cut her face out or he's scribbled over it or something. He's effectively went out of his way when he was younger to erase this woman's face from his history. And the weird thing is now, decades and decades later, now that he's an old man, he legitimately can't remember her face. And we get into this almost eternal sunshine of the spotless mind kind of idea of trying to remember that person he cared about because the time still meant something. And then there's a few other things that it goes into as well. But that's basically what this is. It's exploring of his memories, and the guide, the AI, she has a little bit of a personality and starts to kind of ask him questions about what they're looking at, and it's kind of a character piece that kind of slowly reveals his faults and maybe some of the things that he is responsible for in the relationship, and then ultimately kind of like getting to grips as to why he feels the way he does, and maybe him realizing some things that he didn't before, and kind of really coming to terms with who this person was in his life and mistakes that both him and her made. So it's a very character-driven episode, and it's probably the best one of the season so far, frankly. I think it's a pretty beautiful concept, and I think some key things keep it on track. One is that it doesn't go for some big, crazy ending or a big twist reveal, which has been a problem with the few episodes this season. It kind of keeps it simple, and it, you know, like the ending of the episode, which is simply the idea that he accepts everything he's learned and then makes the choice with the final piece of like evidence or like memory aid that he had. He makes the choice that he wants to see her face, and the episode ends with him finally seeing her face and it being a beautiful moment. That lands. That always, as soon as this episode started and we got to the raw concept of he can't remember her face, and that first photograph they go into, where he walks in front of her in the memory in the still photograph, like sort of flashback, and he's horrified that it's just sort of digitized kind of like mannequin face because there's no face to put on it yet. As soon as we hit that moment, the end of this episode had to be him finally seeing her face, finally remembering her face. And then all the bumps and turns that we take there, like there's ways they could have derailed it and they didn't, even when I thought they might, and they might go too far with something, they didn't. They kept it with some restraint, and they gave me a really solid character episode that very neatly, with each memory he goes into and explains to the guide what this memory is and about things. I love how it slowly reveals like his faults, like little things where he's got a line before he even goes into a memory where he mentions that after he was so hurt after whatever happened, right? The breakup of whatever it was, that he had a big drinking problem, and that was something that happened after. But then when we go into the memories, like one of the first couple, we see that he's holding a beer in a photograph, and he says, "Oh, she didn't like that because I wouldn't put the beer down." And it kind of starts to imply, oh, he already maybe was drinking too much. It was already something that was a bit of a problem whilst they were together, and it's maybe not something that he's ever come to terms with and realized. Like, he was very... It was much easier for him to just demonize her at the end of the relationship rather than, think about what he did wrong or anything like that. And it kind of goes backwards and forwards a little bit, and the guide kind of starts to sound a bit more judgmental. For example, a big character element of Carol, the woman from the past who died, is that she played cello. She was a musician. In fact, they were all kind of musicians. They went to like an artsy college. But one of the memories is a photograph of a gig because she joined Paul Giamatti's band. And in the band, she's playing keyboard, and immediately the guide's like, "Oh, why isn't she playing cello? She loves cello." And he's like, "Oh, no, she was cool with it. It wouldn't have fit her sound." Like, he just kind of dismisses it. And it starts to, like, even though, I think what I like about it is that it gives everything from his perspective, but it still wisely has him say things or reveal things that clue in the audience that he's at fault as well. Like, she isn't just this awful, like, other half that did all these bad things to him. And it's not to say that there isn't something that she did that would be a traumatic event. Like, when we finally get to how they broke up, yeah, like, the experience for him is a fairly traumatic night in terms of how it went down. But it's not like, oh, she was a villain the whole time, and like, because that's all he really says. She was doing this, she was doing that. And the guide is very quick to point out when there's an inconsistency in his story. Like, there's one memory in the photographs where they're at like a bar, because he worked at a bar. It's a Halloween night, so everyone's in costume. And he starts complaining that some guy was sitting next to her, Carol, chatting her up all night. And he starts talking about how, oh, it was super, like, I was mad because, like, even though I was right there working, I could see her the whole night. She was still sitting there letting this guy talk to her. And he really paints her as this villain who was trying to make him jealous. And very quickly, the guide is like, hey, like, her body language says she's uncomfortable. She's leaning him back. She clearly doesn't want to be near this guy. Like, if anything, the implication kind of becomes that maybe she was sticking around to keep an eye on him because the other bartender, who's a woman, is very flirty with Paul Giamatti's young character. And that comes back to play later as well. But it's this idea that, like, there's this other side to everything. The way he's framed everything in his head is constantly being challenged. And it's almost like a really positive version of the season 1 episode. The episode where everyone's memories are recorded. Now, these aren't recorded in the same way. This is more going into, like, old school Polaroids. But it kind of reminded me of that, but in a much more positive sense, of the idea of being able to, like, why it's important to keep some memories and remember people and remember what they meant to you, and be able to go back and think about, how things went down, and, learn from any mistakes you might have made, and come to terms with what relationships with certain people meant to you, and what was important about them, and all that. And I think the big thing I was happy about as the episode goes on, obviously there's a bit of like almost like a detective-y mystery part of it, where he finds like an old disposable camera from the time that he took the trip to England to see her, because she moved to England for an orchestra job playing the cello, and she was going to be gone for several months. And that's like a big plot point. And that's when he ended up having a one-night stand with the girl from the bar. and like they had a big fight about that. And like I like how these memory scenes play out, because his brain's filling in the memories when he's kind of like defending why this happened and that it's not that big a deal and he was going to forget about it. To the guide, he's trying to justify what she's kind of caught him in. And even we even only have this scene because the guide said, who took this photo? There's a photo of you lying in your bed, in the apartment when you were supposed to be alone. Who took the photo? And then we go into the photo and he starts talking about how it was the other bartender that was kind of flirty with him. So he's trying to justify all this, and he says it wouldn't be a big deal unless, and then the guide's like, unless what? And then immediately the phone starts ringing. And I really like this sort of logic of like, the phone physically starts ringing in this scene because he's remembering it and thinking about it. It's this really natural kind of way that his recollection of the events is filling out more of what's happening in the scene. I think that's a really smart little filmmaking device that lets the scene keep moving forward and feels quite natural. But yeah, so he plans a whole trip to go to England to see her after this incident happened, and he took an engagement ring, and we get this whole story. And I really liked as well that it's not even all of his photographs that he has. This is from like a magazine, because he booked a fancy restaurant that he saw in a magazine on the plane. So he has this old magazine in the box, and he looks at the advertisement for that, and it's actually the photograph in the magazine they go into, and he's like, oh, this is where we were sitting, and he explains it all. And basically he says that he pulled out the wedding ring, or the box, and she just went quiet and eventually left. He kept drinking and so on. There's a few other details I'm glossing over, but like, he does, like, he mentions a couple of things, like being annoyed that she wouldn't have a drink, which immediately, anyone who's ever watched a TV show or a movie is like, oh, a woman's choosing not to drink? I wonder why. Assuming that's not a normal thing, I wonder why that's the case. And I think there was a little worry that they were going to reveal that this woman's daughter, who's arranging the funeral, is going to turn out to be his daughter. And it wouldn't even have been like a silly twist or anything. It would have been a relatively natural thing to do. But I think the restraint in having it not be the case is a benefit to the episode. Because the guide basically says, hey, it's the summer of 92, she wouldn't drink, she was pregnant with me. And it turns out that and not literally her in the strictest sense, but it turns out the guide in this tech is basically like she calls it an avatar, but like a duplicate with most of the real person's like opinions and feelings. The idea being that this AI can decide like what's suitable for the funeral without the real person ever having to like look at stuff that might be upsetting, right? This idea, this version of the daughter can, see these bad memories that are quite sad and not get her upset, but it does affect her a little bit because she has all those feelings and thoughts and whatnot. So it'd have been so easy for them to have this be the reveal that this is his kid. And I was really pleased they didn't do that, because they could have done, it wouldn't have been wild, it wouldn't have been like wacky or anything, it would have just been maybe a little generic, I guess. I think the idea that it's from a one-night stand, that basically after she got mad that Paul Giamatti had a one-night stand, she had one of her own with someone in the orchestra and ended up pregnant. And that's actually why she walked out of the proposal dinner, right? She felt a lot of emotion. She's like trying to work up the nerve to tell her long-time boyfriend that she is pregnant with someone else's child, and she kind of wants to keep the child. And he's hit her with this, and she can't. It comes back to this idea again of him not really considering why she reacted the way she did. He just assumes it's for a bad reason, that she was already cheating on him, that she was this, she was that, and it's the guide who has to sit down and kind of explain, no, it's maybe it's this, and this. But one of the interesting things she brings up is that she did leave a letter for you explaining things, and Paul Giamatti's like, what are you talking about? I never got a letter. And this is where the kind of detective-y stuff comes in, because he's like, they're looking for other photographs that might have a clue to figure out more stuff. And eventually they find a disposable camera that he never even used. He bought a disposable camera because this was the early 90s. And there was one photo taken on it, and they were like, oh god, what if her face is on that photo? What if I took a photo of her? I can't remember. So he finds a place that still develops film. They get the photo, and it's a really awkward photo of just like his hotel room looking like a mess. And he is basically he trashed the room because he was so drunk and mad after the dinner, blah 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 blah. But because this AI, this tech, like enhances all the image, so it's like, you know, high res and stuff, so you can look at it up close. They can see in the photograph that there is a letter with his name on it, like lying on the floor that he clearly never saw. And he tries to pick it up, and she's trying to explain to him, no, this won't work. This they didn't recreate everything. It's only we can only create the scene based on what we're seeing in the camera. Like the physical objects can't be picked up, and you can't do anything with them. I like that because that was like sticking close to its like sci-fi idea. I think a bad version of this story would have had him be able to pick that up and read it from the photograph. That would be the sloppy version of the story. But he basically it all boils down to he realizes that when he came back the next day, the maid had cleaned the room up and left everything in a neat pile. So he goes looking through all the other sort of like books and stuff that were there. Like there was like a brochure and like maybe like a map book or something, you know, things that a tourist would have. And lo and behold, the letter is inside one of the books, and he finally gets to read it. And obviously, the two things that come from this is one, so she hadn't just ran away and didn't tell him anything. She did explain the situation. So that's one thing. And the second thing is that at the end of the letter, she said, I don't know how you're going to take this, but if you still want to see me, and I wouldn't blame you if you don't, but I'll be waiting at the, you know, the exit door at the, you know, the orchestra studio or whatever it is tomorrow at noon. Come and see me if you want to see me again. And because he never read that letter, he never showed up, and she took that as him making his choice, and that's how things ended. And he never knew, right? So it's like this kind of revelation of all this stuff, and I think, if anything, the looking for like that one magical photograph that might be on this disposable camera, in some ways this is the most like TV writing it gets, because it's kind of fantastic. Well, not fantastical, but like it gets a bit more kind of like, oh, we're doing this for excitement and drama as opposed to just raw character building. But I think it's simple enough that it works, and it feels kind of exciting to see what might be on it. And I never thought it was going to be her face, because that felt too easy. The narrative ending to the episode had to be him remembering her face. That was always going to be the emotional payoff. But this moment, I think, works as a bit of fun that fits well into the story. And then the reveals of what all this means, and kind of like the connection to the daughter, and that he never knew about any of all this. It's this idea that he, you know, it's not like he seems like he's a happy old guy either. He seems to live alone. It seems like his life's not necessarily been like amazing or anything. And he's very disgruntled. Like, that's the impression we get from the start of the episode. And all of a sudden he cares about something. There's a tear in his eye, and he gives a shit. So one of the memories, the photographs that he was looking at earlier that I glossed over for now, was him looking into a room where Carol was playing the cello for him. And obviously he goes up to the door and looks in, and he can't see anything because the photograph isn't of inside the room, it's just of the hallway. He doesn't even know who took the photo. Which I thought was going to come up. Maybe it's just a sort of an ethereal thing. Like but it is kind of interesting that the photo that ultimately let him remember her face was from someone he doesn't even know who took it. He doesn't know where that photo came from. There's almost kind of like a fate, like stepping in and making sure there's like a breadcrumb for him there. But this is like halfway through the episode. He looks in and he can't see her. And he explains that, you know, because she says, oh, music's a powerful memory aid. What was she playing? If you know, I could search Spotify or whatever and get it playing, and it might help trigger your memory. And he says, no, that won't work because it was something she composed. And it's like, oh, that's quite beautiful, but obviously it doesn't help. Here, after all these revelations, though, later on, when he finds out about the letter, he reads the letter, and the guide is saying sorry, because the guide is very convinced that this is all genuine and he didn't know any of this, and this is quite hard-hitting for him to learn all this these years later. That now, would he have went and met her and accepted that they might raise another guy's child? Maybe not. Maybe he wouldn't have made that choice, but he never got to make the choice, is what's the upsetting part. I mean, maybe he would have made the wrong choice and he'd be sitting here with regret all these years later, but that's a little bit different than never even having the chance of making the choice in the first place. So he says, all right, let's see your face. And he pulls out an old cassette, and it's a recording that Carol had made for him of this cello piece, sorry. And he plays it. he stands at the door in this photograph inside his head as the music's playing, and you see Carol like playing the cello, but her hair's kind of in her face, and it kind of sort of gradually she'll turn a bit more, and the daylight's beautifully coming in through the window, so you get like the face, and eventually you see her smile. And this is actually intercut. So right at the start of the episode, and I mentioned this, like he said he can't go to the funeral because it's on the other side of the planet. Halfway through this, it starts intercutting with him arriving at the funeral, and he's black suit and tie, and he stands at the entrance of the church, and everyone else in the audience has all got their little computer things on their head because they're all looking at memories. And up in the front of the church is the real daughter playing the cello, because it was mentioned that she taught her daughter how to play cello. And he looks up and sort of smiles at her, and she sort of looks back and smiles at him. And it's almost like it does this thing. I actually almost thought they were going to have the same actress play the mom, the Carol. I thought they were going to have that same actress play her, and the idea that she would look alike kind of thing. But they don't do that. They have another actress play it, and it just ends with her looking up and smiling, and then Giamatti smiling, and it fades to black. It's all very beautiful, and it's like this celebration of this person. It's just funny because obviously it's those sad moments in this episode. It is about a person dying, but the heart of the episode is about someone looking for the memories and looking for why they loved this person in the first place. It's like a eulogy or a grieving in the truest sense of the words, and realizing just how much there's a really great line actually when the guide reveals that she's a copy of the daughter. She says something like, hey, yeah, mum never really talked about this time in her life, and Paul Giamatti kind of scoffs at that, and he's like, hey, that doesn't mean it wasn't important or meaningful. In fact, it probably means the opposite. It probably means it was important and meaningful, but there was too much baggage to want to discuss it, right? Because I mean, I have to imagine, how much is he discussing this time in his life? Probably not, right? I find it hard to imagine he is, given everything we have seen up until this point. So yeah, this is such a strong character episode, and it uses a little bit of science fiction to kind of allow it to, it makes the idea of looking at a photograph a bit more literal, I guess. Like the idea that you can go into the photograph and relive the memory and try and use that to help remember what people mean to you and things like that. It's a very positive episode, and it's actually really nice in a show that's usually about the dangers of how technology can be used, that this is actually an example of, hey, this is where the technology is good and it's not all bad. Some of the ability of being able to take a photograph or record a video is a good thing ultimately. There's lots of good reasons for it. And the one thing I've not even said yet somehow is how good Paul Giamatti is in this episode. Like, there's so many times in this where he chokes up a little bit, or he gets angry, or he's just kind of taking something in and you realize he's starting to feel something for the memory he's looking at, or he's starting to reminisce, or he's excited that he can remember that they were painting the walls blue in their first apartment, or whatever it is. I think my favorite moment of performance, obviously the stuff at the end where he's sort of content and he goes to the funeral and it's like he's happy to meet, because you have to assume that he maybe would go and actually have like a chat with the real daughter afterward and sort of introduce himself. Maybe she knows some about who he is. I assume some of the datas came from this memory of the violin being played, or I keep saying violin, the cello being played. She at least saw that part, I assume, when he sent it in for the funeral, like, festivities is not the right word for that, but you know what I mean. But anyway, what was I getting at? Yeah, so my favorite moment of his performance, and it's a lot of good moments to pick, but there's a moment when they're in the restaurant memory and everything's kind of out on the table, and she's explaining, the guide is explaining what it was, and he's like, why didn't she tell me? And the guide says, would you have listened? And he's like, yes, of course I would. And she's like, really, a bottle of champagne down, you would have listened. And the way Paul Giamatti like raises his voice in like a sort of desperate way and repeats the phrase, I would have. The way his like voice kind of cracks as he says it is so good. Like, it really feels like he's trying to convince himself that he would have more than anyone else. There's a desperation, and he's saying it in a sort of almost begging way, where he's praying that he would have, and you'll never get to know if he would have now. And it's a perfect little character bit that really sells the emotion of what's going on. So between Paul Giamatti's performance, the very strong idea and heartwarming idea of trying to like regain the memory of someone that you intentionally forgot because the memories were too painful, but then realizing how important all the good memories were is just such a good idea. And I think it works. I think it ends exactly the way it should have ended. I don't think there's anything to improve with the ending whatsoever. Not a single thing. This is a fantastic episode. It is the best episode of the season so far. I've not watched the last one yet, so maybe I'll love that one too. But and it's not that they've been bad. Like I've liked everything to some extent so far this season. I think. I'm doubting myself now, but this one is pretty great, and I think it's definitely in the top 10 episodes of the show. It might even be top 5 episodes of the show. I'd have to like go look at all the episodes again and think about it, but it's pretty high up there. I think it's a special episode, and it's something that I think that this show has been missing for a while. I don't know when the last time I said, oh, that was a special episode that I think is important and that everyone should see it. It might have been the first USS Callister. It might have been the start of season 4. Because I liked episodes in 5. I liked most of 6. I hated the werewolf one, but, you know, and I've liked a lot of what's been in this season. But I've said a few times that it's never felt quite like, oh, this is like as must-see as it once was, or it's doing something really spectacular or whatever. This is kind of like what I've been waiting for a while. It's been a few seasons since I felt this about an episode of Black Mirror. So, Eulogy is fantastic. I recommend it. I'm looking forward to finishing the season. Probably in another week or so, because there's other things going on this week. Murderbot's starting on Apple, and I've got some Patreon shows to do for people and all sorts. But Eulogy's great. Loved it. So there you go. And it was well directed as well. Like the way it handled the walking around the memories with everyone like being frozen, also great. Like just there's so many little elements that give it a cool feel, and it never feels creepy, except maybe the faceless Carol at one point, which is genuinely kind of weird. And I love that when they're in a memory where her face has been scratched out with pen, like that like pen scratchings will be over her face in the 3-dimensional space. That also looks pretty cool. So just a really well thought out idea. Really good stuff. So yeah, let me know what you thought of this episode in the comments. Like, subscribe, all the usual things help out a bunch. The main way you can help, though, of course, is financially over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, or you can support via YouTube membership if that is preferable. Any support from any direction is greatly appreciated. Even a YouTube thanks is a one-time thing. Any support is greatly appreciated. Thank you very much for joining me. I do appreciate it. I keep saying appreciate. I'm floundering here. I think I need dinner. But thank you once again. I will see you guys next time. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?